still missing.
In the vicinity of George Inlet near Ketchikan, Alaska.
And 10 others were treated for their injuries, and the sightseers were from a Royal Princess cruise ship. Federal investigators are en route to the area to piece together what caused the crash. China plans to slam the U.S. with tariffs on $60 billion worth of U.S. goods.
China has raised tariffs on more than 5,000 U.S. products, with the new rates ranging from 5% to 25%. Items affected included beef, lamb and pork products, as well as various varieties of vegetables, fruit juice, cooking oil, tea and coffee. In London, Benjamin Hall, Fox News.
China's move comes after the Trump administration more than doubled taxes last week on $200 billion worth of Chinese products. The escalating trade war sent U.S. stocks into a spiral, with the Dow plummeting 617 points. That's more than 2%. The U.S. may send even more troops to the Middle East. Fox's Sean Langell reports.
With escalating tensions with Iran, the White House is considering a plan that could send upwards of 120,000 troops to the Middle East if Tehran attacks American forces or ramps up its nuclear ambitions. That's according to a new report from the New York Times. Vice President Mike Pence telling Fox's Shannon Bream.
We're going to continue to stand firm with what really is a new alignment across the region.
Some Democrats are concerned the Trump administration may push the U.S. into an unnecessary conflict with Iran. And the State Department wants activists who support disputed President Maduro to get out of the Venezuelan embassy in Washington. U.S. law enforcement served eviction notices to the group Monday. This is Fox News.
Hi, welcome to this Subway ad for the new Sweet and Smoky Steak and Guac Signature Wrap. How would you like it?
I'll take my ex-girlfriend, just checking in.
Aw.
Hey, David, it's me, just checking in. I'm doing great. Just got the new Sweet and Smoky Steak and Guac Signature Wrap from Subway. Creamy guacamole, smoky sweet with Hio mesquite sauce, and double the tender steak. They just know what I want before I do. So, yeah, things are going pretty great for me. Subway, make it what you want. Limited time only at participating restaurants. Double meat based on average 6-inch sub. Okay, bye.
We have some really great home loan programs, but did you know we have great business loans too? Every day we're working with companies to purchase equipment, to buy or build properties, or make tenant improvements. We offer letters of credit, working capital, and term loans, and we make all of our credit decisions here. Commercial loans, commercial banking from Bank Pacific.
Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender, member FDIC. Viva Bank Pacific.
A Mississippi community honors one of its police officers killed in the line of duty.
Hundreds of law enforcement officers joining other mourners Monday to remember a slain Biloxi, Mississippi police officer. 57-year-old patrolman Robert McKeithen was shot to death outside the Biloxi police station on May 5th. Biloxi Police Chief John Miller says McKeithen will be remembered by how he lived and not how he died.
A misguided thug with a gun gets no credit.
A 19-year-old has been charged with capital murder in McKeithen's death. The suspect's brother and 3 others are charged as accessories after the fact. Rich Dennison, Fox News.
North Carolina is still trying to decide who will represent its 9th congressional district, which was marred by fraud during last year's election. On Tuesday, Republicans head to the polls to pick a candidate to face Democrat Dan McCready. State Elections Board ordered a special election after it found Republican candidate Mark Harris used a political operative who improperly handed in the ballots that were taken from people at their homes. The family of a drunk driving victim sues Tiger Woods.
The parents of Nicholas Imsberger filed a lawsuit Monday against Tiger Woods, claiming their son was served to excess following his shift at the golfer's Jupiter, Florida restaurant. According to the suit, the 24-year-old Imsberger finished his shift in December of last year, but stayed at Tiger's The Woods restaurant for hours, where he was served alcohol to the point of severe intoxication before driving home. Imsberger was killed in an accident that night. His blood alcohol level more than 3 times the legal limit.
Fox's Matt Napolitano and deputies in Charles County, Maryland, credit a boy with saving him and 6 other kids. He called 911 on Friday to say that they'd been left in a hot car with the windows rolled up and no air conditioning. Deputies arrested the driver, 37-year-old mother of 2, who was babysitting 5 others. I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
Experience the Take Care difference. Take Care members can count on accessing a high-quality, credentialed network of on-island providers, including the convenient one-stop FHP Health Center and urgent care, access to an extensive off-island network of providers, and the island's largest offering of free fitness classes and health education programs. You can count on Take Care to deliver comprehensive, accredited insurance coverage and quality health care when and where you need it. Take Care. Our island, your health plan. Learn more at takecareasia.com.
Here at APL, our core values give the company its heart and soul. Whether it's connecting your business with our global network through our newly enhanced service or investing our efforts into giving back to the community, APL is committed to serving you. We humbly honor the opportunity to find innovative solutions for you and your business. To learn more about our enhanced service, call 588-4651 or visit www.apl.com/Guam for more details.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I've read through the Second Amendment a couple of more times to find out if there's a Cracker Barrel exception somewhere in the Second Amendment that I've overlooked before. What caused me to conduct that little search was an article that appeared in Bearing Arms, and the title of the article is Cracker Barrel Hides Secret Anti-Gun Policy. Well, so when I read it, you know, of course I always have my blue pencil handy, and I'm always looking for usage. If they're hiding it and it's secret, how effective can it be, right? Yeah, we have this rule that we always enforce here on Tall Tales about posting, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. But we do expect you to obey it. Right, Real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, if you don't obey that rule, the Real Joe Cruz will be on you like a ton of bricks. All right. So this is Tom Knighton, who writes to the website. He said, I respect the right of private businesses to determine whether or not they want a customer to have customers carry firearms on their premises. A sign posted on the door of an establishment telling me they don't want my firearm inside their establishment lets me know they don't want my business or the business of more than 100 million other Americans. Kind of a marketing gimmick, isn't it, huh? Where I get irritated is when companies try to play it cute, as Cracker Barrel has. Well, I think you could accuse Cracker Barrel of being a lot of things. Cute? No. A little rough around the edges, kind of rustic, antique. Cracker Barrel trying to play it cute with a hidden anti-gun policy. That sounds like something the CCU would come up with. Yeah, we have this rule we want everybody to obey, but you can't see it. And the only time it's ever discussed is in executive session. Okay, so a hidden anti-gun policy that only came to light as they... Now, whenever I see the word T-H-E-Y, I'm always looking for a translation. I don't know if it means a single person whose sex is undetermined, whose sex is determined but cannot be mentioned because of the application of the doctrine of political correctness, or if it refers to more than one person. Because they can be used, nowadays, they can be used in every single situation. So Cracker Barrel is a hidden gun policy that only came to light as they publicly humiliated a man in Dalton, Georgia, who had a revolver on his hip. A Dalton man says he was asked to leave Cracker Barrel when managers spotted him carrying a handgun. He said there was no sign stating guns are not allowed on the property. Now he wants answers about why he was asked to leave. Shane Franks says he went to Cracker Barrel in Dalton to purchase Mother's Day cards. Yeah, well, you know, this Shane Franks is an okay kind of guy because he thinks about his mother on Mother's Day, and he's not going to go down to a 7-Eleven and buy a cheap card. He's going to go out to Cracker Barrel and probably pony up $8 or $9 for a really snazzy Mother's Day card for his mom. And what thanks does he get from Cracker Barrel? He says 2 managers escorted him out because he was carrying a gun he believes he had every right to take with him into the building. This revolver is what triggered managers at Dalton Cracker Barrel to escort Shane Franks out of the building Monday. Now, I don't know, they use the word triggered there. Is it okay for conservatives to use the word triggered? Is it? Because the left is always talking about, I didn't want to go to that meeting but because I was triggered when I heard someone say white. So I just turned around and left. It's okay, though, for a conservative to use the word triggered, right? Now, is it okay to talk in terms of using the word triggered when you're talking about being asked to leave with a firearm? Actually, that sounds like something I'd say, doesn't it, Real Joe Cruz? Yeah.
Yep.
Two managers escorted him out. This revolver, Frank says he was legally carrying the gun on his hip when management asked him to leave. Quote, if the business does not want you to carry firearm, they are asked to make it known, said Franks. Frank said there was no sign posting telling him he couldn't take the gun in until after he returned without the weapon. He stuck to it. He's going to get that Mother's Day card for his mom no matter what. When I came back, there was a paper sign and placed it on there. It said, unless you are law enforcement, you are not supposed to have a firearm. Georgia's Safe Protection Act says it's legal for licensed gun owners to carry in schools, churches, bars, and even some government buildings. Private businesses have the right to decide if they want guns on their property. That's confusing for a law-abiding citizen who thinks he's obeying the law and walks in, gets cornered in front of everyone for doing what he thinks he is allowed to do. When Channel 3 visited Cracker Barrel Friday, the makeshift sign was no longer in the window. A manager referred us to a corporate spokesman who denied our request for a statement, probably because it was a personnel matter, right? But a customer service representative tells Channel 3, if a gun is seen on any Cracker Barrel property, the owner will be asked to return to their vehicle. Don't tell me that even Cracker Barrel has gone politically correct. Frank said he got a similar response. It's our policy. No one carries on the premises. I said, you don't have any signs. He says, well, that's our decision also. We don't put up signs. I guess they saw the movie Treasure of Sierra Madre. Have you ever seen that movie? Very dramatic scene where these 3 prospectors from the U.S. are trying to find some gold in Mexico, and they run across some banditos. And the banditos tell the 3 prospectors, one of whom is Humphrey Bogart, that they are federales, federal law enforcement. And Humphrey Bogart says, if you're the federales, let us see your badges. And the top gunman pulls out his gun and he says, bang, bang, bang. We don't need no stinking badges. These are our badges. Bang, bang, bang. Yeah. So I guess the manager, the guy down there at Cracker Barrel in Dalton, Georgia, must have seen the movie recently, probably on Turner Classic Movies, because he said, "We don't need no stinking signs. Here's our sign," as he kicked Mr. Franks out the door. It's apparently Cracker Barrel's policy not to let gun owners know that they are anti-open carry and then to publicly embarrass. Publicly embarrass. Now that is really serious. Public embarrassment. Open carriers for violating a policy that the company seems to purposefully kept hidden to avoid blowback. How's that working for you now, Cracker Barrel? Yeah, I peeking out the corner of my eye here, and I see Brad posting saying that that's extremely disappointing about Cracker Barrel. Love the place. Guess they just lost a loyal customer. I won't go in and spend money anymore. Probably just sit in the rocking chairs on their front porch outside with my firearms. You bring along one of your buddies and you can play checkers out there, Brad. Yeah. Well, tremendous marketing mistake. They've lost the entire Brad Hewitt coterie. That's going to cost them big bucks. So when I saw this, I got a little curious. I couldn't find any statutory prohibition on Guam for carrying firearms into Cracker Barrel, assuming there were a Cracker Barrel here. But I did find something that's pretty interesting that I actually was aware of it. Something that we borrowed from California. You know, you probably never had it explained, but in 1933, some smart young naval lieutenant, that's not an oxymoron, by the way, decided that Guam needed a body of civil law. So he took California law. I suspect he probably got a set of California statutes and just crossed out California and wrote in Guam wherever it was applicable and made a few other minor changes. So for a long, long time, much of our law was very similar to California law. In fact, a well-equipped law office has old California law books because some of the cases dealing with old California law is still pretty persuasive. So the sections that I'm going to read to you go back to the original government code back in 1952, and they were picked up from the California code and added to the California code in 1904. And here's how it goes. This is, let's see, 19 GCA 2109, personal rights. Any person within the jurisdiction of this territory who conducts himself in a proper and lawful manner. I guess it doesn't apply to females and the 19 other genders that we now recognize, right? Unless we go back by that old common sense rule that's probably even in the definitional section of the law that says him includes both sexes. I don't know if it is defined now to include all genders also. But anyhow, the statute reads, any person within the jurisdiction of this territory who conducts himself in a proper and lawful manner is entitled to the full and equal accommodations, advantages, facilities, and privileges of inns, restaurants, hotels, eating houses, places where alcoholic beverages, ice cream, or soft drinks of any kind are sold for consumption on premises, barbershops, bathhouses, theaters, public conveyances, and all other places of a public accommodation or amusement, subject only to the conditions and limitations established by law and applicable alike to all citizens, residents, and other persons. So I got curious about this because, you know, every once in a while you go into a business and there's a sign that says, we reserve the right to refuse service to anyone. And that just never seemed right to me. You know, it never happened to me, but it just wouldn't seem right if I went into somebody's retail store and said, I want to buy a half dozen balut. And the person behind the counter said, no. no, you can't even stay here because we reserve the right to serve anyone. You see this sign up here, buddy? Yeah, it just never seemed right. And my instinct was correct because there's a statute that said you can't reserve the right to kick somebody out. That's Section 2109 of 19 GCA. If a person is behaving himself when he comes in, you can't say, we reserve the right not to serve you because it might get you're too tall, or I go into a shoe store, we don't have size 14, we don't want you to gum up our premises or whatever. So I wonder how this would work if Cracker Barrel came to town. An interesting question. Okay, well, so much for Cracker Barrel. I'm really disappointed in Cracker Barrel. As I mentioned yesterday, I really like that restaurant. And I always, whenever I get a chance to go to the mainland, I always go to Cracker Barrel. I like to take it used to be the grandchildren, now it's the great-grandchildren to Cracker Barrel. They really like it, too. It's a great place for kids and grandpas.
Yeah, they got a lot of the old candies, too.
Yeah, and their marketing plan is great. You can't get in and out of the restaurant without dragging your wife through that store, right?
Yep, it's a setup.
Yeah, and chances are your wife is going to find a couple of things she just has to buy on the way in and out, right?
Yes, yes.
So you spend, maybe you go in there and you spend $25 for a meal, and it only costs you $75 to visit Cracker Barrel. But you got to hand it to them. They've got a dynamic formula. And you can go to Cracker Barrel in Lebanon, Tennessee, or not in Las Vegas, but you can go one in Lebanon, Tennessee, or El Paso, Texas, or wherever you can find one, and you have the feeling that it's always the same. Always the same motif. Everything is the same. The menus are the same. The service is really, really good. The prices are reasonable. And I suppose you can't take a firearm into any of them. So I'm about to make a ruling here in the Real Joe Cruz. I haven't ever ruled like this before. But I'm going to put the pox on Cracker Barrel. A pox on Cracker Barrel. Yeah, it's a good Shakespearean curse on Cracker Barrel. And it'll be lifted when they get around to either letting people bring their firearms inside or at least putting a stylish sign on the front door. And they could do it in Cracker Barrel fashion. We're all at peace in here, so please leave your muskets and your other guns outside. Thank you, Cracker Barrel. They could have done that. Bad news from Cracker Barrel. Okay, so from there, we go to Zemi Ikotny. Pop quiz. We're going to have a pop quiz. Okay, tell me if you've ever heard these words before. American troops sexually assaulted one another an estimated 20,500 times last year, a rate of nearly 400 cases per week. That's a 38% jump in assaults from the last Pentagon survey on predatory behavior among troops conducted in 2016. How about this? Acting Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan called the overall trend a scourge and demanded military leaders better police climate challenges within their limits. Do you remember where you've heard that before, Real Joe Cruz? Well, let me read Saturday's editorial. Here's how it starts. A study by the Pentagon reveals that cases of sexual assault in the military ranks has increased 38% from 2016 to 2018. American troops sexually assaulted one another an estimated 20,500 times last year, a rate of nearly 400 cases a week. a 38% jump in assaults from the last Pentagon survey on predatory behavior among troops in 2016. Acting Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan, blah, 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 right? Oh, that was Saturday's Daily News so-called editorial. And how about this? American troops assaulted one another an estimated 20,500 times last year, a rate of nearly 400 cases a week. That's a 38% jump in assault from the last Pentagon survey, blah, 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 blah. Acting Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan. This came out in USA Today last week. Yeah, USA Today. So as I said yesterday, maybe I'm blaming the wrong person. Maybe USA Today is cobbing off with the drafts of the Daily News's editorials and plagiarizing them. And I've been blaming the Daily News. You know, it's bad enough that they played USA Today on Saturday and then come back and plagiarize their plagiarism on Monday. And as a former publisher of the Daily News said, you know, back in his day, plagiarism could cause you to lose your job. It could be a career-ending event. You could ask Dorrance Kearns Goodwin or Brian Williams or I guess it didn't hold this guy up, Joe Biden, who's a serial plagiarizer, right? But we used to think that plagiarism was really bad. I got to jump over to my bag and get my red pen. So, you know, for one of our two daily newspapers to continue to do this, apparently with impunity, really makes me glad that we're not a one newspaper town, that we have an alternative to the Daily News. Because, you know, when you plagiarize repeatedly on your editorial page, you lose credibility. Because your readers are going to say, you know, if you copy that from somewhere else, it's not your original work, and you're trying to pass it off as your own, then what value can I place on your news stories? Is that something that your reporters went out and found? Or did they just copy it off an outhouse wall somewhere and run it in the paper? Okay, so for today, the second time ever, here it is, the Daily News. Got the P for plagiarism. Yeah. Not something to be proud of. The big P. Okay, then we go to the Post. And once again, you don't have to fasten your seatbelts for the Post editorial today, but at least it's original. At least the cake was made in a bakery right here on the island. We didn't have to order from Washington, D.C. to find out what's going on in our own community. And this one talks about Neighborhood Watch. It says, get involved in your village's Neighborhood Watch or be part of creating one. And it goes through the sad story of the lady who came out and found that she had inadvertently opened a B&B, but that the person who was taking advantage of her apparent B&B really shouldn't have been in the house at all. So she was able to get a hold of some other people, and the village mayor, Jesse Gogui, came over, and the story had a happy ending because they got the intruder, Johnny Salas, and locked him up. And he's still in the Crossbar Hotel right now. And the Daily News call to action is be proactive. Make the difference between keeping ourselves. Being proactive can make the difference between keeping ourselves and our neighbors safe and becoming a victim of a random crime. So they're saying, how about setting up a neighborhood watch program? Well, that's great. You know, it's really something that could have been a news story based on an interview with a responsible police official. It's not quite editorial material. It's better, you know, it's passable, but it doesn't rise to the level. It doesn't rise to the our Carl level. You'll recall our Carl was only the second civilian in the history of Tall Tales to be awarded the coveted Blue Star. And I suppose what I ought to do is commission a medal maker, medal, M-E-D-A-L, not M-E-T-A-L, to make a blue star that our Carl could wear on his lapel when he gets dressed up for gala functions. So no blue star today. It's Mark's rejoinder.
It's important to have claims process that works for you. At Guahan Insurance Services, we make things simple and convenient. Same door you walk in to purchase your insurance is the same door you open to file your claim. We can't pretend that the car insurance claims process is fun, but we can promise a hassle-free and speedy recovery without any runarounds. For your home, auto, and business insurance, visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center on Marine Corps Drive in Tamuning. Don't forget to like us on Facebook or give us a call at 475-1162 or text 929-SAVE. That's 929-7283.
2-for-1 dinner time is back at Ruby Tuesday Guam. That's 2 fresh garden bars, 2 tasty entrees, and a sweet dessert to share for just $25.99. 2-for-1 dinner time for a limited time at Ruby Tuesday Guam.
And now back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the one radio show politicians don't want you to listen to. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Yeah, I just took a peek at the Facebook, and I noticed Lady D, Denise Legaspi, is back. She's been absent for a few days. Glad to see you back, Dee. And I know you'll be popping your popcorn for the big halftime show. Let's see here. Somebody else comes in and says, the Blue Star is a high honor. Now I'm worried that I have nothing else to look forward to. How can I possibly top receiving the Blue Star? Is that possible? That must be from our Carl. Yeah, it is kind of the pinnacle of success, isn't it? Really?
Where do you go from there,
yeah,
right? That's
really.
the question.
Yeah, where do you go from the top? Well, Carl, you're just going to have to continue to be part of the Tall Tales International listening audience for inspiration. I suspect that if you do, you'll find a new quest that will be as every bit as rewarding as your Blue Star. Okay, then we go from there to the card, and this is what I've got on the card. I've got Joe St. Augustine versus the Grand Old Party, the Republicans. And I've got me. Yeah. You know, I don't like to talk about myself, real Joe Cruz, but just like Rush Limbaugh says, this time I got to, because it's about me. Yeah.
Bob versus the world.
Yeah. Well, this time it's Bob versus Mike Bora, and you'll see why that's relevant. And then I've got Barry Mead versus John Fernandez. Barry Mead says folks over at public schools think that you can count lunch hour as instructional time. So Barry has filed a petition with Tall Tales, so we're going to give him a hearing on that. I've got Melvin Wonpat Bora, the new executive director of the Chamorro Independence Commission, versus Apathy. Melvin Wonpat Bora versus Apathy. And I've got Rashid Tlaib versus America. She's made the card before. I think Rashid Tlaib is a chronic example of the left's mantra, our strength is our diversity. Rashid Tlaib being a prime example. And then I've got the left versus Trump, Lincoln versus Abraham Lincoln versus Robert Underwood, Fernandez versus Juan Pat. I probably won't get that far. But let me start out with Joe San Augustine versus the Grand Old Party. And what I've got here is a story. If Bill 136-35 becomes law, Guam's minimum wage will be $9.25 by 2021. Okay, and I got Barry right now. Well, okay, I tell you what, maybe we'll go a little bit out of order here. I'm going to invoke the rule in Jimmy's case here. And I'm just going to read something quickly, and then I'll pick up the phone, Barry. This is Barry's petition. I was wondering if, as a tall tales, you could discuss how it is that in calculating the classroom instructional time required to meet the 1,260 hours of classroom instruction for middle and high school, Superintendent John Fernandez has relegated his responsibilities to the GFT president, Sanjay Sharma, stating that the 7 hours of classroom time, instruction time, includes lunch. Yeah. I suppose if you were studying Italian in school and you had spaghetti and pizza and lasagna for lunch, you could make the argument, but I don't think that's what they serve. Then Barry goes on to say 1 GCA, section 715 L13, requires that middle and high schools require 1,260 instructional hours per school year. Yet currently, the schedules that are being used in all the high schools will not reach 1,260 until late June. Under the current calendar being used by GDOE, they are still employing the 180-day requirement, which would require 7 hours per day of instructional time. But as annotated in the GFT-GEB contract, it specifically states instructional time is time in the classroom. It appears that the Department of Education and the Guam Education Board, the legislature, and the Attorney General would all prefer ignoring this concern rather than upsetting Mr. Sharma and the GFT and ignore the fact that they all have screwed up. Well, okay, Barry. Okay, Barry, you came to the right place because I will entertain your petition, and you may present such testimony as you find appropriate.
Hey, thanks, Bob. Let's go to first where the union is getting their 7 hours. If you look at the current Guam Education Board GFT contract under the word definitions, you'll find instructional time is specific to that time with which you have teachers working in a classroom. Right above that is a definition for the duty day. The duty day for all teachers is 7 hours total in middle school, high school, and 6 hours total in elementary school. The 6 hours in elementary school is cool. It's what they used to do. They have 5 hours in the classroom. 180 times 5 is 900 hours. But not one high school has a daily schedule of more or even up to 6 hours of in-school, in-classroom instruction time. So what has happened is that during the drafting of this bill, and I spoke to Senator San Augustine, and he is emphatic about the idea that instructional time is that time in the classroom. And when this was going on, the superintendent had, I guess, assigned one of his associates, Mr. Joe Sanchez, who has a myriad of problems, to oversee this, who in turn gave it to Sanjay Sharma to go do all the discussing. You'll find in the union contract references 900 hours for elementary school, but references 180 days for middle and high school. Consequently, I say that they won't reach the number of hours until the end of June because they are not even reaching 6 hours of classroom instruction. And if you do the math, tacking on all the days, you're going to end up in the middle of June. Now, what I was mentioning yesterday about other information, I had sent an email to Joe St. Augustine recommended that I send an email to Thelina Nelson because it's her committee that's dealing with this. So I did. And she said, oh, yeah, she's heard other concerns and they're going to look into it. And I never heard from her again. So I sent her an email the other day saying, look, you can ignore this all you want, but she sent me back another email saying, oh, they're going to definitely do this, and they're going to have a public hearing, and they're going to have a roundtable on this on June 17th. Well, June 17th, all the teachers are gone, the students are gone, and the high school students are going to be short about, give or take, 200 hours of what's mandated by law. I did this originally in January to bring light and bring attention to the superintendent of this problem. And he blew it off. He said he doesn't have to respond to my FOIA request because the information that I wanted, they don't keep a record of. Now, what was that information I asked for? How many days and hours do you need to make up for all the typhoons and all the school closures so far up to, I think it was the 4th of January? And how do you plan on reaching the 1,260-hour requirement? Well, we don't keep that information, so we don't have to give it to you under your FOIA. As GMH found out, that's not true. They do have to provide that information because I question how is it that they decided to add 4 minutes to the classrooms to make up time if they don't know how much time they're going to make up. So it's very apparent that and a question could come up as to whether or not contract law outweighs the legislative law for the 1260 versus the 180. But they did it for the 900 for the elementary, so why didn't they do it for the high school? And there was an easy fix and an easy solution to this that I gave them. And you have copies of those emails, of which they also chose to ignore. Hey, that's fine. You can ignore me every day of the week. I don't care. But what you're doing is you're not following the law. And as pointed out by the legislature the other day, the government of Guam overall is very good at not following the law on the EPA issues, on this issue, and others. And the only laws they like to follow are the ones that tax us. So this arrogant, if you will, attitude of Mr. Fernandez and Mr. Sharma just goes back and reflects as to why are we really here? Why are they really here? And what is the board doing about it? Mr. Mendiola chooses to totally ignore. And by the way, the Education Board has 5 members, supposed to have 9. We're waiting on the governor to appoint the other 4 ever since January. And when is that going to happen? So the question is, and when you look online and look up instructional time, they all say the same thing. So I want to see the names of the teachers that are responsible for these students at lunchtime, and I want to see the grades, and I want to see what subject they're getting these grades in for this
lunchtime instructional time, period. Simple enough.
So, is there a document somewhere, Barry, that says that lunchtime is instructional time, or is that just something that one would have to deduce by doing the math?
That's something that Sanjay Sharma deduced to meet the 7-hour requirement per day of a duty day for teachers. When you look up the documents, when you look up the, what's the word I'm looking for? When you look up the literature on instructional time, they all say the same thing. Classroom, teachers, grades, they all speak to the same thing.
Sure.
Instructional time is learning time. So I guess if a student has an off-campus task for lunch and goes home, does the mom become the instructor? Not a certified teacher?
I'm trying to think of some way that you could fashion a sunshine law request that would get at the at a document that describes what happens at lunchtime and on the school campuses.
I think in my overall conversations with Mr. Fernandez through the email and with Felina Nelson in the email, they all got the point.
Well,
they all get it.
Yeah, I know, but
you know, I guess what I'm going to have to do is, you're right. I didn't think of that one, of sending another FOIA and to show me their doc. Yeah, that's a good idea. I think I'll send that one to them tomorrow. I'm sure they're going to love you for that recommendation. Because show me where it says. Because the only thing they have in writing is the GFT contract that says the duty day shall be 7 hours inclusive of lunch.
The contract says that?
The contract says...
Okay, the teacher's duty day. Okay, I got it, yeah.
And you have to remember, when you're dealing with the GFT, they never speak to student issues. They never speak to student needs and student welfare. They only speak to the teachers. Now, they can say, yeah, as a union, they represent the teachers. But without students, you don't have teachers.
Well, let me jump in there for...
The teacher responsibility. You know, you as a former superintendent are well aware of having to deal with the GFT.
Well, you know, that's true, Barry. And at a previous incarnation, I was even the chief rabble-rouser for the GFT.
I know you were. You've been, like me, you've been on both sides of this coin.
Right. So let me jump in and put some caps on this, Barry. You know, Sharma is the president of the GFT. He has a constituency. I wouldn't condone everything he does, but I would certainly be able to understand that it's his job to provide the tension with the superintendent that he thinks is necessary to service his members. So I can't find as much fault with him as I can with the superintendent, because it's his job to make sure that every single kid in that whole system gets an adequate public education. And counting, you know, painting with a broad brush, counting lunch as part of the instructional day, that's not an adequate education. And I'd like to go and address something else here. Joe San Augustine is not blameless in this thing either. The Every Child Act, as enacted, had this language at point 13. It said that an adequate public education consisted of at least 180 instructional days each school year, with school years ending no later than 30 days following the end of the calendared school year. Well, Narissa Underwood got involved with it, and instead of amending 17 GCA, which is the education law, she amended the Every Child Act, which is in Title I of the law, and it's not an operational statute. It's a standards-setting statute. It's sort of analogous to, you know, the Constitution and Congress. So there was a flap over whether or not Easter and Christmas vacation could be used as makeup day. So she amended the law to say that an adequate education could not consist of using Easter and Christmas for makeup day. Just no sense at all. Then St. Augustine made it even further. He says scheduled Easter and Christmas breaks shall not be included in makeup days or hours, and then the 180 instructional days are to be converted into equivalent hours by computing elementary school days at 5 hours per day for a total of 900 hours, by computing middle, high school, and high school at 7 hours per day for a total of 1,260 hours per year. Well, when you have poorly drafted statutes, then the Sanjay Sharmas of the world are going to come out and try to capitalize on that. If it were necessary to go beyond the standard set in the Every Child Act, it could have been done by board policy. We would hope that the school board has some understanding of what a school day is.
I laugh.
Yeah.
The school board, as I pointed out many times before to deaf and non-hearing ears, over 60% of all the board policies date back to 1973. They haven't been reviewed, updated, changed since then. And as far as NERISA is concerned, when they brought up the Title IX problem with John Fernandez and they tried to fire him, I testified at that, or I was going to testify, but they didn't want to hear public input. The fact that one of the biggest problems they have with the Education Board is that, and I even gave her an amended version to whichever point it is under the 14 points, to mandate that the board shall review in even numbers of years, board policies 2, 4, 6, 800s, and of course the other side is 1, 3, 5, 7s. 9 is totally ridiculous. It's something more than the personnel rules and regulations of the government of DOE that still has Wilford Applique's name affixed to it. So when you have a board that is absent the ability to review its board policies and bring them all up to date and current, you can't expect them to know the definition of the difference between a duty day and instructional time.
Barry, I got right up against the break. We did entertain your petition. I'm going to have to recess the hearing on your petition now. But if you have new information, we can always reopen, okay?
Okay, I'll do that. Yeah, I'm here at the Naval Hospital. I have to visit a vet, help him get his VA benefits right now, so I need to go too.
Okay.
And Bob, I will keep you up to date, and I will update you. And oh yeah, by the way, on the CCU issue, good job.
Well, thank you very much, Barry. It's always a pleasure talking to you. So long. Okay, so I can remember when I was a youngster in grade school, and my Uncle Al would ask me, Bobby, what are your favorite subjects in school? I would always give him two answers, Real Joe Cruz: recess and lunch. Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know if that still counts as instructional time now. Apparently, I was onto something when I was just a kid. Okay, so that's the petition of Barry Mead. Yeah, we got to take a short break, and then I'll come back to Joe St. Augustine versus the GOP.
Legends aren't born, they are made. And during our Jeep Celebration event at Cars Plus and Mighty, you'll receive up to $6,000 in accessories with the purchase of a new Jeep Wrangler, Motor Trend SUV of the Year. Customize your new Jeep to the way you want it. Or how about a new Jeep Grand Cherokee? Save up to $5,000. Or save up to $7,500 on a new Jeep Compass Sport. It's our Jeep Celebration event going on now at Cars Plus and Mighty. Cars Plus, driven by you. Accessory special cannot be combined with other offers. See dealer for details.
GRMC's Neuroscience and Neurology Department treats a wide spectrum of disorders associated with the nervous system, spine, and brain. Some of the more common disorders include seizures, epilepsy, dementia, sleep disorders, migraine, and stroke, which is one of the leading causes of death on Guam. GRMC's neuroscience team is equipped with the latest technology and the finest neurological doctors. To make an appointment, contact GRMC Specialty Clinics at 645-5500.
Yankee Doodle Dandy. Okay, real Joe Cruz. Thank you. Okay, so Joe San Augustine versus the Grand Ole Party versus the Republicans. There are 10 Democrats in the Guam legislature, and there are 10 something else's in the Guam legislature. You know what, real Joe Cruz?
Women, sir.
Yes. Yeah, we have to talk about that every time we mention the legislature. It would be politically incorrect, and it would be an example of gender bias not to recognize that 10 of the senators are females, as is our governor, the first female elected governor. So Joe San Augustine introduced a bill. It's 136, and he's going to raise the minimum wage to not less than 75 cents an hour per hour effective March 1, and not less than $9.25 an hour effective March 1, 2021. So March 1 of next year, it goes to $7,875, and the following March, it goes to $9.25. All 10 of the Democrats co-sponsored Joe San Augustine's bill. Not a single Republican co-sponsored Joe San Augustine's bill. Well, I'll get into my temper tantrum here about the minimum wage in a moment, but before I do that, I'm going to pull out my politics prism. Remember that? When I look through this politics prism, it filters out all light created by morality, morals, the law, scripture, empathy, whatever. And the only thing that comes through are political considerations. It's my, what do I call it? My political spectrum. Yeah. So the fact that none of the Republicans signed on to this bill might mean, no, I'm probably too optimistic here, that the Republicans have finally gotten the idea that they are going to be powerless unless they become the majority. That means that there are 8 of them and 7 Democrats, and that they are not going to get the majority by being really nice guys. Even though one of them isn't even a guy, it would be Mary Torres. So perhaps, and this is kind of a long shot, maybe the Republicans have finally begun to act like Republicans. Republicans are fiscally conservative. The Republicans don't favor big government. Republicans don't want to see government getting into your business and telling you how to operate your business. These are some of the minimums that Republicans do. So if you really are Republicans, you got to take the majority away from the Democrats. I can tell you how not to do it, going along and co-sponsoring Democrat feel-good bills, which you actually ought to be opposing, but you should oppose feel-good Democrat bills, and you should oppose them vigorously. And you should be very articulate as you tell the world why you're not going to go along with the feel-good Democrats. A few years ago, a group of businessmen paid for a political survey. I'm going to keep you in suspense as to what that survey said until after the big halftime show. Then I'm going to come back to the political aspects here, and then I got to go through the usual stuff about minimum wage, and then I'll get to Melvin Borja versus apathy.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Promising to help farmers. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. President Trump says he will designate $15 billion in aid to help U.S. farmers hurt by the U.S.-China trade war.
Out of the billions of dollars that we're taking in, a small portion of that will be going to our farmers because China will be retaliating probably to a certain extent against our farmers.
The president did not offer any details on such an aid package, which would have to be approved by Congress. The promise follows China's decision to retaliate with tariffs on $60 billion in U.S. goods after the Trump administration more than doubled tariffs on Chinese products last week. The escalating trade war sent U.S. stocks into a tumble yesterday, the Dow following 617 points, more than 2%. North Korea is demanding the U.S. return the cargo ship it seized last month, Pyongyang calling it robbery. The U.S. accused the ship of trying to import coal into North Korea, a violation of U.S. UN sanctions. Vice President Mike Pence tells Fox News,
"Our objective is to achieve the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. We're going to continue to stand strong on sanctions and enforcing sanctions, working with our allies in the region."
North Korea state media reports that the foreign ministry accuses the U.S. of betraying the spirit of last year's summit. Former Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein has some rather harsh words for FBI's past director James Comey. He says he made some bad decisions when investigating the Clinton emails.
The clearest mistake was the director's decision to hold a press conference about an open case, to reveal his personal recommendation about the case, and to discuss details about the investigation without the informed consent of the prosecutors and the Attorney General.
Rosenstein speaking last night in Baltimore. This is Fox News.
We know too well the inconvenience of not having power after a storm. You worry about the food in the freezer going bad. Nights get hot. It's hard finding comfort when going to sleep. These are realities. But with solar and battery storage from Micronesia Renewable Energy, these realities can be a thing of the past. The solar works during the day and the batteries power your home at night. Call 632-2613 to see how solar plus battery storage can make life a little more convenient. MRE, the smarter choice.
Hey, it's Mom. Somebody forgot to thaw the chicken, so meet us at Chili's for 2 for $25. Oh, and congratulate your sister for making the basketball team. She's thrilled. Love you. See you at Chili's.
Enjoy 2 full meal combos for $25. An appetizer, 2 mouth-watering entrees like our crispy chicken breast, smoked barbecue quarter leg, or smoked jalapeno cheddar sausage. Served with corn on the cob and french fries. 2 bold combos for $25. A full-on meal deal available nightly for a limited time. Together, we Chili's.
Presidential candidate Joe Biden fires up a crowd in Manchester, New Hampshire with criticism of President Trump.
You gotta know, we choose hope over fear. We chose truth over lies. And we choose science over fiction. Folks, it's time to pick our heads up. Remember who we are. This is the United States of America.
Biden is the front runner in the Democratic field of more than 20 candidates. The Coast Guard says a 4th body's been recovered from yesterday's deadly mid-air crash of 2 small sightseeing planes in Alaska. 10 people made it out alive, although some badly injured, and 2 are still missing. Sightseers were passengers from a Royal Princess cruise ship. The maker of Roundup weed killer loses another case against cancer victims.
A California jury awarding more than $2 billion to a couple who claims Monsanto's Roundup weed killer caused their cancer. The jury in San Francisco Superior Court in Oakland ruling the company was liable for Alva and Alberta Pilliard's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Their attorney, Brent Wisner.
We had 100%, 12 jurors on all of the important questions. Specifically, did Monsanto act with malice? Every single juror agreed.
This is the largest jury verdict against the company to date in legal battles over the chemical glyphosate. In a statement, Bayer, which owns Monsanto, says they're disappointed in the verdict and they will appeal. Lisa Lacera, Fox News.
And in Stanley Cup action, the St. Louis Blues win Game 2 to tie the Western Conference Finals.
Now to Bortuzzo, backhand shot, he scores! Robert Bortuzzo!
Kenny Albert on NBC Sports Network. Robert Bortuzzo gives the Blues back the lead late in the second period. Oscar Sundquist's third period lamplighter would ice it for the Blues as they take Game 2 of the Western Conference Finals over the Sharks 4-2.
Fox's Matt Napolitano. Game 3 is Wednesday night in St. Louis. I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
Business travel just got easier. Take your data plan with you for only $10 a day to all 17 Data2Go destinations. Never worry about additional data roaming charges when you go where your business needs you. The US, China, Thailand, and so much more. Have the assurance you need to check emails, surf the web, and stay connected. Call 688-2677 today to make sure your account is Data2Go ready. Docomo Pacific. Better together.
Let's go for a drive.
Let's take a stroll. Let's gallivant.
Let's go cruising.
We all have different ways to describe how we get up and go in our cars. But whatever you may call it, you can do more of it when you save 6% off your fuel purchases at any Shell station when you use your eligible Bank of Guam Visa and MasterCard credit cards. So stop by any Guam or CNMI Shell station and start saving today. Visit bankofguam.com for more information. Terms and conditions apply. Bank of Guam, the People's Bank. Member FDIC.
So another really exciting halftime show here that marks the end of the first half here on Tall Tales. We are now in the second half of Tall Tales. We've got the seventh inning stretch coming up here a little after 5:30. That'll take us down to the home stretch at about 10 minutes to 6, and that will signal the end of another perfect day here on Tall Tales. Before the big halftime show, I was talking about the possibility that we may see the phenomenon of Republicans actually acting like Republicans instead of Democrat light, trying to assist the Democrats with their expensive feel-good legislation, reaching across the aisle, being really good people, etc., instead of being partisan advocates trying to get the majority and enact Republican-type legislation. Now, maybe, and this is kind of a big maybe, but maybe it's just more comfortable being in the minority. Nobody expects much of anything from you. You have the perfect alibi for not producing when a constituent approaches you and says, why didn't you pass that bill, or why did you repeal the grocery receipts tax? Well, I was in the minority and I really couldn't get any of my bills through. And the constituent says, well, I didn't hear you hollering about that. I apparently you just took it in your stride. Well, when you're in the minority, what else can you do? It's time for the Republicans to put that aside unless they want to be in the minority for the rest of their lives, putting comfort ahead of accomplishment. You're not going to accomplish much of anything in the minority. 5 Republicans in the legislature. If you want the majority, you're going to have to take it away from the Democrats. And this minimum wage issue might be just exactly the right place to do it. I've seen a Democrat majority upset before when they got behind the grocery receipts tax. You may remember that in the 27th, the Democrats had the majority, and by the time we got to the 28th, Not only had the Democrats lost their majority, but the Speaker of the legislature had lost his seat. That didn't happen by accident. That happened because the Republicans aggressively pursued the majority. So if you want to be in the majority, you got to get up and do something. If you're more comfortable in the minority, no one expects much from you, you've got the perfect alibi for non-performance, well, then up until now, you've kind of done the right thing. But let's hope that this is a turnaround here in this minimum wage issue. Now let me just opine for the moment about minimum wages, the concept of the minimum wage. There's really only one minimum wage, and that's zero. If you don't have a job, you are getting the minimum wage. If your time is worth something to someone else, then you may be able to get a job. If your time, let's say, is worth, let's say someone pays you $10 an hour for your time, when it's all sorted out, that person has to be able to make more than $10 off your time. If he only makes $9 an hour, then your job is going to go away. People hire employees because putting the employees on the payroll will help the owner of the business make more money than he would if he didn't have that person on his payroll. Now, I know the Democrats would have you believe that wages are primarily governed by, not by the brain housing group, but by the heart and perhaps the intestines, that a good-hearted person is going to pay a living wage. And what the calculations are is secondary. The really important thing is to pay people a living wage, remembering that they have children and car payments, etc. Now, the fact that the businessman, wait a minute, not the businessman, the business person, is only able to stay in business if his profits exceed his expenses is an interesting but kind of an irrelevant fact to the left, because the left says the first thing you do is you exercise your good-heartedness and you pay people good money, preferably a living wage. And then when you go to sell your product or your service, whatever it is, you also have to take into consideration the buying power of the people that you are dealing with. And so, for instance, if you're in the grocery business, you have to remember that, some people don't have a lot of money, and food is a big expense for them. So you'd want to keep the price of food low. So you sell your product for a low price because you're a good-hearted person, but you pay high wages because you're a good-hearted person. And all of this mumbo-jumbo about profits and loss and revenue and cost of goods sold and depreciation and opportunity cost, just don't pay any attention to it. That's not what really counts. And if you really buy into this, then you'll also understand that if business can't do it, then the government certainly can, with the good-heartedness and the low prices and on and on and on. And the rules, like everything else with economics, there are concepts and rules that kind of govern. And I wouldn't hold myself out as an economist. I've done a fair amount of reading as far as economics is concerned, and I haven't yet run across the recommendation from a real economist that you let your good-heartedness set your wages and your prices. That is, if you want to stay in business for more than a couple of days. So I see 10 people here doing some virtue signaling. They're saying, we're going to raise the minimum wage here. And Joe San Augustine, goes through the obligatory litany. Some people are just scraping by, and business got a break with the Trump tax cut, and now it's time that business pays it forward by raising the wages, by raising the minimum wage, et cetera. And he even has this novel theory that when people have more money in their paychecks each month, their increased purchasing power stimulates our economy. When our people prosper, our local businesses grow and our island flourishes. So the key is that everyone has more money in his paycheck, right? The so-called multiplier effect. And the way Joe's theory would work is this: if you had to repair your roof, real Joe Cruz, and you didn't have a ladder and you wanted to get up on your roof, what you would do would be to grab a pretty good-sized bucket, reach over and grab the handle of the bucket and lift really hard and lift yourself up to the roof that you want to work on. You wouldn't need no stinking ladder then. That's kind of what Joe's talking about. If there's no production, then there are really no wages. And the only way to increase real wages is to increase production. Let me explain what real wages means. Real wages means how long a person has to work in order to buy something. Now, our country, thanks to our Federal Reserve System, has embraced inflation as though inflation should be the norm, because it is the norm. It has been the norm for a long, long time. So you can't look at the dollar figure for wages or products over time and come to any realistic evaluation of what real wages amounts to. But an example that I like, and I've probably used it before, but it's a good one, when television first came out back in the 50s, well, you know, I was there. I was already 12 years old, yeah. And I remember when television first came to the little jerkwater town that I lived in, Breber's Music Shop put a television set in their show window on Walworth Street. And all day long, as long as TV was on, there would be a huge crowd of people looking in that window. Oh, it's television. Wow, isn't that something? So, you know, some people actually went out and bought televisions, and I'm happy to say that my dad was able to buy a TV set. He paid $129 for a TV set that was about close to 3 feet square. And one man could lift it, but one man shouldn't lift it. It was dangerous. It really was a two-man lift to pick it up and put it on a TV stand, etc. It had a 10-inch screen, black and white, of course, and we could get stations from Chicago and Milwaukee. It didn't matter what season of the year it was, there was always a lot of snow on the screen. It wasn't technologically a very good TV set at all. And it cost $129. I think my dad was probably making around $65 a week at the time. So he probably had to work a couple of weeks, maybe more than that, because, you know, deductions are over 2 weeks, to accumulate enough money to go downtown and buy that TV set and bring it home. You couldn't I don't think you could find a black and white TV set now, no matter how hard you tried. Could you, real Joe Cruz?
It'd be difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. And to find a TV set that weighed so much that it took two persons to lift it up, that's a big order too. That TV screen would be about as big as the wall in your office there, right? Yeah. So it's been a while since I bought a TV set, but I expect that the average wage earner, you know, for 2 or 3 days can go downtown and buy a pretty snazzy flat screen TV set, color, and all kinds of other stuff. So that's a way of explaining that real wages have increased dramatically since 1950, and that goes for just about anything you can think of, with one huge exception, and that would be health care. And the reason for that huge exception is because the government has gotten so involved with health care that the ordinary rules of economics have been thrown out. So the cost of health care and real wages continues to go up, up, up. So my first question in dealing with the minimum wage is, does raising the minimum wage actually increase real wages? And my conclusion is no. It doesn't, because when you raise the minimum wage, you're in effect, in a short run, raising all wages. And as you raise wages, what happens to the cost of the products or services that you're buying? The price goes up. Ray Gibson's dad pretty much explained the theory of taxation. Businesses don't pay taxes. The people do. And it's the same way with the minimum wage. The businessman will pass those increases on. The business person will pass those increases on as much as he can. If he can't, then his next alternative is to do away with the expense. Take that guy that had been making $8.50 an hour, and instead of having him work 40 hours a week, let him work 35, because that's all you can afford to pay him. Just stay on his back and make sure that he produces 40 hours worth of stuff in 35 hours. So businessmen, as the price goes up, the cost of goods is going to go up, and the cost of goods will go up perhaps in a more appreciable fashion for the folks down there at the minimum wage level. You know, I'm not at the I spent my years at the minimum wage. I'm not there now. But believe it or not, I don't spend every penny that I make on stuff that would be affected by that salary increase. So the increasing the minimum wage is not going to affect me as much as that poor fish who's making $8.50 an hour and is going to have to pay more for everything that he buys because the minimum wage goes up. Now, I see, Real Joe Cruz, that I've got a Carl on the line. Can you be more specific? Say again?
Our Carl.
It's not the Carl, it's our Carl. Okay. Good afternoon, our Carl.
Hey, Bob. Good afternoon.
I suppose you're still kind of resting on your laurels and polishing up your blue star, huh?
Yeah, I am. I'm going to frame it, and it's going to go in a special place.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in about a minimum wage. I've been trying to do a little reading and trying to understand it better. And I just wanted to give a historical perspective, and you can probably confirm what I'm saying. In the early years of the minimum wage in America, I believe this was the early 40s, the reason why it was actually put in place was, and it was strongly pushed by unions. Unions wanted protection from from unskilled labor, and specifically, especially in some parts of the country, there was a desire to protect from competition by black Americans because they were undercutting the union labor. So they were strongly in favor of minimum wages. I'm not saying that's what's happening today. I'm just saying historically that was one of the main motivations for minimum wages. It was to price less skilled or unskilled labor, and especially non-union labor, out of the market. And that's the effect it had.
That makes a lot of sense, Carl. I often offer the example of if the minimum wage is $8.50 an hour, what do you do with the person whose time is only worth $8 an hour? For him, the minimum wage is zero because nobody's going to hire him, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly. It just gets to the point where the employer says instead of giving a totally unskilled person a chance to get their foot on the bottom rung of the ladder, and go through all the hand holding and all that stuff. But they're so the labor is much more affordable, so I'll do that. I'll do the on the job training, and they'll learn. But once you increase to a certain point, they say, well, if I might as well just hire someone who has more skills and more experience if that's the case. So minimum wage, not that the economy is going to completely implode. That's not going to happen. But what is going to happen is that the people at the lower end of the economic ladder, the very people who the legislature claims to want to help, will be the ones that will be harmed.
Let's say the Democrats, because for once the Republicans didn't get on the bandwagon, Carl.
Yeah, exactly. They may have learned their lesson. Let's hope. But the employers have options. Once the minimum wage is put in place, the lower end employees they can cut the hours, so they're earning a higher per hour wage, but they have less hours. So they're actually probably behind from where they were before the whole minimum wage law was enacted.
And they're going to be paying more for goods and services. So how does it help, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or they can cut positions, or they can, as we've seen up in various McDonald's, because of minimum wage laws in various parts of the states. They've got the kiosks now. Because it becomes cost-effective to use kiosks as opposed to using a real live person to take orders.
At the new McDonald's in Jigo, Carl, you can order your Big Mac and coffee without talking to a person because they've got the kiosk right there.
Yeah, exactly. And at the lower wage, it was cost-effective to just hire a living person to do it. But at some point, they just they run the numbers and they just say, well, it just makes sense for us to put in kiosks. This is no longer cost effective, and they're not in a business of trading money. They're in the business of after all expenses are calculated in, showing a profit. So they're doing what they can to do that.
True enough.
And I will ask you one last thing, Bob, before I hang up. I did look at your FOIA request from the CCU.
Yeah.
I think you were trying to, you were reacting to them turning down Kevin Kerrigan's FOIA request. And if you could, talk about that later in the show when you get a chance, I'd appreciate it.
Okay. I'm going to, probably right after this, I'm going to go into that issue for a few minutes, Carl.
Yeah, I'd be interested to learn more about it. Anyway, thank you very much for allowing me to chime in as usual.
It's always a pleasure, Carl. Thanks for calling.
Thank you.
Well, that was our Carl. His credentials include having won the coveted Blue Star in the Meet the Press portion of Tall Tales. Only 2 people have ever been able to do that. Carl's one of them. Okay, so going back to the minimum wage. First of all, I don't think raising the minimum wage actually raises real wages. I think it probably is harder. It's going to be increase the hardship on the people that the do-gooder Democrats want you to think that they're helping, with their virtue signaling Bill 136. Second, I always ask this question, well, what about the guy who's not worth the minimum wage? If the minimum wage is $8.50 an hour, what is the guy whose time is worth only $8 an hour? What does he do other than, he's not going to get a job? Whereas if there were no minimum wage law in place, it might make sense for an employer to hire him at $8 and perhaps reap an $8.50 benefit from his employment. That's kind of how it works. No one has been able to satisfactorily answer that question for me. Next question. If the minimum wage increase really works and it really increases real wages, why are we horsing around with $9.50 an hour? Which everybody says is, is right down there in the poverty line, et cetera. Why are we horsing around with such small numbers if it really works? Why not pay everybody $50 an hour? Wouldn't we? Yeah. Would you like to earn $50 an hour, Real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir, I would.
There you go. You know, it's unanimous. So why not pay everybody $50 an hour? And then taking the Joe San Augustine theory here that more money in the paycheck stimulates the local economy. Just think if everybody had $50 times 40 hours a week, that's a couple $1,000 a week. Think if everybody had a couple $1,000 a week to go out and spend, the multiplier effect, and we'd have so much money we wouldn't know what to do with it. And we wouldn't have to worry about prices then, because even if prices went up a little bit, gosh, $50 an hour. But here's Joe San Augustine, apparently doesn't understand, because he's only going to raise the minimum wage to $8.75 an hour by March of 2020 and to $9.25 by March of 2021. Doesn't he want the people to make a lot of money? Is he that heartless? Yeah, well, I'll come back to Joe right after we finish. I'm not going to look for Jack Haddock this time.
2-for-1 dinner time is back at Ruby Tuesday Guam. That's 2 fresh garden bars, 2 tasty entrees, and a sweet dessert to share for just $25.99. 2-for-1 dinner time for a limited time at Ruby Tuesday Guam.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training every morning on The Ray Gibson Show.
When a little mix-up made it look like a Mother's Day lunch might be derailed, I was thinking of trying someplace else. I'm Jerry Roberts, and at 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, I'll tell the story of how that Mother's Day meal turned out just fine because a real pro stepped up.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Well, that's a 7-inning stretch from the center field bleachers at Wrigley Field in Chicago. Just curious, I wonder if Chicago has a very effective missing persons. Chicago cops have a very effective missing persons bureau. Well, I'll just put that aside for now. Okay. So going back to Joe San Augustine and his feel-good minimum wage, here's what he says. He says, our community received federal and local tax breaks. I'm still looking for the local tax break. And it's time to pay it forward. Yeah, with somebody else's money, Joe. If you want to pay it forward, dig into your own pocket and pay it forward. San Augustine said, referring to the Trump tax cuts that went into effect in 2018, which was, perhaps the most horrendous thing that ever happened to Guam since Typhoon Karen, according to the 34th legislature and Governor Calvo. And then Joe goes on to say, he said his concern is that the cost of living continues to rise, but wages have not kept pace with inflation, and the unfortunate reality is that many of our families live in poverty. So if wages have not kept pace with inflation, Joe, what do you think that gross receipts tax increase that you voted for, what effect do you think that had? Or the liquid fuel tax that you voted for, do you think that those had any effect? If you really want to increase real wages, maybe you could take some time and set those taxes at a lower rate. For most people, a reduction in the cost of gasoline would be a real increase in real wages. And the GRT, of course, falls most heavily on these people that you show so much concern for. People living in poverty, the lower end of the economic spectrum gets hurt worse by the gross receipts tax than anybody else because it's a regressive tax. So, you know, I guess I will commission you, Joe, to start a parade around downtown Agana. You can make some posters or banners or whatever you want that say, we're really good people. We're really kind people. We're going to raise the minimum wage. And you can do that, and you can get a little bit more out of your virtue signaling than just introducing the bill and then coming along with conversation that borders on the humorous to support your bill. So if it really worked, if it really increased real wages, then why have we been stuck where we are for so long? You know, we've had a minimum wage here in the territory, I think, going all the way back to the beginning of time. And we keep increasing the minimum wage repeatedly, but apparently nothing ever changes. The thing is this, Joe, you can't push the standard of living up from the bottom. You have to set mechanisms in place that will create the kind of economic vacuum that will pull people upward. That means jobs and productivity. It doesn't mean feel-good legislation. So, sorry, Joe, I can't support your bill to increase the minimum wage, and I do support the 5 Republicans, you know, that had the intestinal fortitude to say, no, we're not going to go along with that, and keep it up. Okay, so that's so much for Joe San Augustine versus the GOP. Next, I'm going to go next on the calendar here to Robert Klitzkie versus Mike Bora. And in order to see why I'm doing this, I'm going to throw out a key word that you ought to become a little bit familiar with if you aren't already. Here is the key word: foreshadow. Foreshadow. And this is something that ran in the Daily News about 3 years ago. And this is what the title of this op-ed piece says: Follow the Sunshine Law. Disclose public records. If you want to know what's going on outside my house, if I want to know what's going on outside my house, I can look out the window. Transparency. If I want to go outside and have a look around, I use the door. I just open the door and walk outside. Openness. The government of Guam does a fair job on transparency with access to much governmental information online. We've got a ways to go, but given the digital age in which we live, many of us will see the day when everything GovGuam does will be accessible online. Would that it were the same with openness. Information not online is kept behind literally and figuratively closed and locked doors. Not to worry, though, because the key to every door is available to each citizen. The key is called the Sunshine Law. It's online at the Compiler of Law's website at 5GCA, Chapter 10. If you want to inspect a public record, the Sunshine Law provides, quote, public records are open to inspection at all times during office hours of the agency, and every person has a right to inspect any public record, with a few listed exceptions. The Sunshine Law also provides, quote, each agency shall organize paper and computer files so that the documents can be retrieved and copied quickly for expedient disclosure of records under this chapter. Sometimes the law allows a director to prohibit inspection of a record. In those cases, the agency must cite the exemptions in law that prohibit the disclosure of the record. You can walk into an agency at any time and demand to see a public record, But it's a good idea to give the director a little advance notice of what you want to inspect, saving both your and the director's time. You should then either be able to inspect a public record or be told what law prohibits disclosure. This is the, quote, key that unlocks GovGuam doors so you can see public records. But there's a catch. Some directors put a deadbolt on the inside of the door. So when you use your key, the sunshine law, the door remains locked up tight. Here are a couple of deadbolts I've seen recently. First, the director stiffs you. He doesn't show up, but sends an unfortunate employee to tell you that the director is not available, that he doesn't have the documents, and that he was completely unaware of your requests. 2, the director uses, quote, the myth. An unfortunate employee tells you that on orders from his boss, the documents are not available for inspection because they're personnel matters. Popular mythology within the GovGuam holds that the mere mumbling of the words personnel matters shields all manner of public records from inspection. Not so. So in other words, all a government official needs to do is tell you, no, personnel matters. And that's it. Game over. Well, that's not so. The law says public records include any writing containing information relating to the conduct of the public's business, prepared, owned, used, or retained by any state or local agency. The limit reads, personnel, medical, or similar files, the disclosure of which would constitute an unwarranted invasion of personal privacy. All information regarding salary and the name and worksite and mailing address of each employee and public official shall be a public record. A director has a duty to redact a record to make a record disclosable rather than rely on the personnel matters myth, if that's all he can do. I don't recommend it, but that's better than the myth. If you haven't figured it out by now, this piece is autobiographical. When the director of land management, Michael Bora, used the stiff and the myth on me, it was too bad for me. But in a way, it was also too bad for him and too bad for you. Too bad for Bora because the stiff or the myth prompts the question, what's he trying to hide? Too bad for you and all the people of our island because unless all the doors are open to everyone all the time, we don't know what's being hidden behind any of them. Directors have bosses, be it a board or commission or the governor, all of whom have a duty to see to it that key words, that no director ever uses a deadbolt. Failing that, you can go to court, and if you win, recover your costs and attorney's fees, plus the director can be fined $1,000 payable out of his own pocket. Another too bad for a director using the stiff or the myth. Well, foreshadowed. You know, what that column foreshadowed the $1,000 that Michael Bora had to pony up once he was actually sued and lost. And it also foreshadows this whole CCU controversy where the CCU was figuratively caught with their respective pants down and were called out on it. And now they're saying, yeah, but you can't see the minutes of that meeting because, you know what the mumble rear, Giorgio? Let's see if you could be the director of GPA. Why can't we see the minutes from that executive session? What are they?
Well,
They're
private, sir.
Personnel matters. Yeah, it's all. And as soon as somebody mumbles personnel matters, you just put your papers back in your briefcase and you shake your head and walk out. Wrong. But that's the game that the CCU is playing right now. Okay, so the reason I read this is that this column, written 3 years ago, foreshadowed exactly what's going on with the CCU. I guess maybe the CCU didn't read this, so that perhaps would be an affirmative defense when suit is filed. Affirmative defense. Members of the CCU never read the column from March 2016 dealing with the myth. Therefore, we can't be held culpable. Okay, let me see who I got here on line one. I've got Mr. Howard. Okay. One of the Three Stooges was a gentleman named Mo Howard. But this is Mr. Howard. Besides that, Mo Howard, I'm afraid, is long ago deceased. Good afternoon, Mr. Howard.
For the record, I am a stooge, so I just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay, yeah. Full disclosure.
Transparency. But I just wanted to call Judge because one is Tall Tales rules. Then I'm streaming I sent a message to you earlier. I'm streaming the CCU live stream right now. And it sounds like they are trying to, well, it's being recorded so you can watch it later. But it sounds like they're trying to dismiss the FOIA request to the personal matters that you just talked about, as well as they're creating questions to ask the Attorney General to get clarification on the FOIA if they have to give the FOIA to the letters that you sent in, as well as they also talked about a discussion about bringing it to court. So I wanted to give you that straight up. They just said that like 5 minutes ago, and it just ended right now. I'm ending the stream right now.
Oh, okay. Well, I really appreciate it, Mr. Howard. It's very kind of you to be a stringer for Tall Tales, as it were, right?
Oh, yeah. They brought up your name a bunch of times. They also brought up Kevin's FOIA request. And the deliberation is basically what they can or cannot give you. But overall, they don't want to give anything. That was my impression. The mic is kind of not too good for their technology that they have. But I wanted to throw that down to you because I know all of us in Guam want to get what's going on with what happened to the debacle, and just my observation is it looks like they're trying to void out that FOIA.
Yeah, they want to play hide the ball if they possibly can.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask this: when someone mentioned my name, was his mouth immediately washed out with soap?
They tried to keep a straight face, but I could also tell that they have never been put in this position where they had to disclose all this information. So that's the other part that that it really looks like they're nervous about it. So I don't know why they would be. It's a pretty simple request. We want to know what's going on, and to ask their own legal counsel, and also to send these questions to the AG when they already have a legal counsel. It's like we're spending all this money, man. What's going on here? Just be straight, tell us what's going on.
Yeah, well, maybe it's like Joe Terlahi and Steve Ignacio. They have to keep asking the question until they get the right answer.
Yeah, so they're going to try to get it to you by Friday. That's the last thing I heard, because that was the time frame for the FOIA. But
okay.
They're also, like I said, don't quote me, but that's because the mic is kind of messed up with it. They have on this live stream. But it also sounds like they're trying to get an extension to not give it to you or whoever requested the information, as well as they feel like they're in a stalemate, and the stalemate is the case law they brought up, that there is a case previously about what the FOIA is trying to get, that says they don't have to give out the information because of the personal matters that you were just talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And they're trying to do it, man. So stick in there, Judge. We're with you. And,
okay.
Yeah, I got it recorded, so they can't say anything about it's not there anymore.
Okay, with the Tall Tales posse behind me, how can I lose, right?
Exactly. We're with you, man. We got it.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks for calling.
Okay, Judge. Thank you.
Now, so the Dancing with the Stars, starring 5 members of the CCU who can find a way to tap dance around. And it, of course, goes right back to what I said 3 years ago. If I can just find it in this column here. Oh, it's that time. Okay, I can find it here real quick. Good.
Family Finance has been serving the people of Guam since 1959, and they'll continue to be there for you in the years to come. Whether you're looking to get a personal loan for that summer vacation or paying off those long overdue bills, Family Finance has got you covered. Apply for a personal loan from $1,000 up to $3,600 by calling Family Finance in Agutya at 475-4545, Upper Tumon at 647-5626, or in Dededo, 633-4473. Family Finance, serving the people of Guam since 1959.
In illness and in wellness, Calvo's Select Care is health care that is there for you. That's why over 80% of the Guam medical community places their trust and insures with us. We offer our members wellness and fitness programs for a healthier lifestyle and provide a comprehensive medical network on and off island to help members from unexpected illnesses. Contact Calvo's Select Care today for more information.
Okay, so we're heading down the home stretch here on Tall Tales. That means I've got about 8 more minutes to wrap it up, and the real Joe Cruz and I will be leaving the studio of The Point, where Tall Tales comes to you every afternoon for your listening pleasure and enlightenment. And before the break here, I was looking for something in this op-ed piece that I had written that kind of picks up on what James Howard's message was about the CCU not wanting to let go of those minutes. And this is the key part. Because in this op-ed I say that using the myth was bad for Bora, because the stiff or the myth prompts the question, what's he trying to hide? And in this case, what are they trying to hide? There must be some real dynamite in those minutes. They must have done something that they don't want anybody to find out about. Because if it is, as Joey Dueña said, well, they evaluated the employees and they gave them raises, what's so difficult about releasing that information? I can only speculate because I don't know what went on in that executive session either. But since they are trying so hard to hang on to it, could it have been something like this? Let's give X a raise because his sister is married to my brother. Is that what they don't want people to find out about? Or is it, let's give so-and-so a raise because I'm trying to buy his car, a car from him, and if he got a raise, he'd probably lower the price. Is it that kind of thing? Well, there's one way to show us that it's not, and it's turn over the minutes, unless you got something to hide. And, of course, the harder they scrap in the face of a Freedom of a Sunshine Law request, the more apparent it is that they don't want anybody to see those minutes. And unfortunately for them, the more I want to see them. Yeah, it's just, you're just, Will Rogers' law of holes. If you find yourself in a hole, quit digging. Now, a little earlier, our Carl asked that I explain a little bit about my picking up on Kevin Kerrigan's Sunshine Law request, which I addressed in my FOIA. Kevin Kerrigan asked for the minutes. He wrote a letter to the CCU asking for the minutes. He got an email back from a lady named Sablon, who said that, first of all, she apologized. She said, well, I know I missed the deadline, but protocol requires that when a FOIA comes in, I show it to legal counsel first. So that's why I said in my letter, apparently CCU protocol trumps statutory law. If there's a conflict, we've got to follow protocol. And apparently she was able to find some way to answer, so she wrote back herself, and she, Sablon, denied Kevin Kerrigan's request. She didn't say, I'm speaking for someone else or someone else has delegated the authority to me. She said, you can't have it because it's a personnel matter and it would be an unwarranted invasion of privacy. She didn't say that she was speaking on behalf of the general manager or the CCU or anybody else. So when I saw that the CCUs could so cavalierly and in such a disrespectful manner turn down a FOIA request from a working journalist, it scared me and it angered me. Who do you guys think you are when a reporter asks you for something and you can tell a secretary to go answer it and tell him he can't have it? And in her letter, she said, she didn't say that, she didn't use her own position. She said, the CCU will not be furnishing those documents. So somewhere along the line, she thought that CCU had delegated authority to turn down Kevin's request. And the CCU has met twice, and unless they did it today, they have not repudiated that authority. So I guess there's a new chapter in the open government, or in the Sunshine Law. One says that time frames established by the law are subordinate to protocols of the CCU. And second, that a secretary working for the CCU may cavalierly deny a FOIA request in the name of the Consolidated Commission on Utilities. So all of these things really get under my skin because, as we talked about all the time, the Fourth Estate, it's the Fourth Estate that keeps the government honest. And when they think that they can just thumb their nose, their collective noses, at Kevin Kerrigan, a good reporter for the Post who's just doing his job, and do it in a disrespectful manner the way they did, I couldn't let that go. And that's what really got under my skin and caused me to download the Nasty Letter software in my computer again and crank out that FOIA, Carl. Okay, I suspect we'll be talking about this again tomorrow. So we'll be back tomorrow at 4 o'clock with another exciting, informative edition of The Life and Times of the Real Joe. No, that's not the name of the program. It's Tall Tales. Goodbye.